Day 3, Hour 3. Well, for the first 10 parts or so, I started out a lot of these videos on the goddamn calendar screen because it turns out you spend so much time on individual days at the beginning of the game that you can easily just cut around each individual day and make parts out of those. I love the transitions in this game, by the way. You know it's a rainy day when the umbrella shapes pop up, and this time we do remember to bring our umbrella.
Seriously?
But how will that lead to potential mishaps where you get to walk home with your love interest in the rain?
Yeah, unfortunately, Frizzy Hair is not as lucky as that. When rain happens to him, it usually leads to bad stuff. And another thing in this game, a running theme, if you will, is that the main characters are never allowed to celebrate. If they are getting ready to celebrate, or if they are in the middle of a celebration, something is going to spoil their mood. Every goddamn time.
No, that's just real life.
It's funny that they did that in this game, though, because those little celebration party things, those little get-togethers, those friendly hangouts, those were a highlight of Persona 4, and they were always, just time to get away from the story for a little while and relax and get to know the characters better. But these characters aren't allowed to have that. They try to have that multiple times throughout the story, but it never works out for them.
I'm eavesdropping with my face right in front of yours.
Yeah, sometimes the direction that Kurusu turns when he's eavesdropping on fellow Tokyo residents is a little bit questionable. Well, only so much you can expect from automatic algorithms. However, the people walking through you whenever you're in Tokyo is entirely intentional, because the majority of the pedestrians you pass on your way to school or on your way to wherever are just meant to be faceless nobodies.
Yep. Which I don't mind that design choice, at least.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the previous games, they were in relatively contained areas, so they didn't have to have all these throngs of people flowing through like a river, and that made things easy for them. They could make a small handful of unique NPCs for each area and call it a day. But with Tokyo, you can't really get away with that. If there's only 5 people on the screen at a time, it's gonna look weird. So they made all these faceless NPCs, made it an artistic, stylistic choice thing, and well, basically just gave themselves an excuse to cut corners while still making it look like it's actually Tokyo.
Yeah, Tokyo Mirage Sessions for the Wii U did a pretty similar thing, where they had tons of people in all of the streets that we were walking around in, except instead of making them faceless and, like, normal looking, they made everyone, like, rainbow colored. Like, one person would be green, one person would be orange, one person would be blue. So, like, the important characters would be the only people with any kind of specific, like, look to them, and everything else would just be a color blob walking by, but,
No, that seems way over the top, but considering that,
yeah, Tokyo Mirage Sessions is definitely more uplifting and happy than Persona 5, so...
Well, that's also being on a Nintendo system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, another difference between Persona 5 and previous games is that the teachers are mostly played as serious characters in this game, which is odd because in Personas 3 and 4, all of the teachers were these kind of lovable oddballs who had their quirks and stuff. And these teachers have their quirks, but they're very downplayed. You're supposed to see them as very strict, stern, somewhat high on themselves, rather than, weird, like the teacher who wears an Egyptian headdress in her history class, or the other guy who wears a samurai helmet in his history class.
The guy with the puppet.
Are you using the Thieves Guild in this playthrough when you're going through the school questions?
Actually, no. I haven't used the Thieves Guild for any of this. The only time I used the Thieves Guild in a previous playthrough was to get a quick look at the different options that I had for that particular day, and and there was one time, exactly one time, and it was my own stupid mistake that a character got taken hostage by a demon, and I used the Thieves Guild to cheese out of it.
Later on in this playthrough, please tell me you get the pirate who was hanged question.
What? Pirate who is hanged?
Or executed for who hid his treasure. Or it was some question about a famous pirate who got caught and executed, and everyone went to the logical conclusion of posting the One Piece intro after the question.
Oh, right.
Yeah, well, the questions are always the same every playthrough, so...
Okay, so whenever you get to that, you better edit in the One Piece intro. His name was Gold Roger. He ended all in one piece.
Now, I say I didn't use a Thieves Guild, but I did use a cheat sheet for all the questions. The reason is, half the questions are questions you're probably not going to know the answer to.
You will not get, like,
and the other,
most of these questions.
Half the questions are questions that you probably won't know the answer to, and the other half are questions that you definitely won't know the answer to.
I will say a big hint for people is that if you're guessing and you're not using the online service, generally a lot of the questions are actually tied to the plot of the game and tied to things you will be seeing, so... If they mention something like Captain Kidd, well, that's Ryuji's persona. Probably that's the answer, you know?
Yeah. Of course, there is one question that I particularly like. It's a question that asks, what's the phenomenon when it looks like the second hand on a clock takes an extra second to move? And one of the answers is the world.
Right. Is that a JoJo reference?
But yeah, the good thing about this is, like, you don't need a guide. Like, if you have an online connection, you can just push the help button, and it will just tell you, like, 90% of people voted for this, so that must be the right answer.
Yeah.
Ask the audience.
Pretty much.
Yeah, that is a feature that they introduced, I think, in Persona 4 Golden as well. When you think about it, Persona 4 Golden was sort of just this big test bed for features that they wanted to use in Persona 5, and all of them are done better here.
It's almost like they spent, like, how long making this game?
Now, it's more a problem that when you insert that stuff into Persona 4, a lot of it doesn't jive with the game balance very well. Like, they made it way too goddamn easy to strengthen your personas, or to make personas with specific skills, or to get rewards after battle. Actually, that wasn't a thing that they used again in Persona 5, because this game doesn't do the cards thing anymore. But, if there's one thing that I can give Persona 5 over 4 Golden especially, and Persona 3, is that the overall difficulty curve in Persona 5 is much more consistent from beginning to end. Like, you'll still be reasonably challenged by the random battles at the end of the game. Whereas, by the time you get to that point in Persona 4, you're basically curb-stomping everything, at least in my experience. And Persona 3 wasn't much better in that respect.
Yeah, I found Persona 4 was like, at least the vanilla Persona 4. Golden, definitely, with the skill cards and stuff, and I think they really lowered the difficulty on normal. They did make it easier in Golden, but vanilla Persona 4, which was the first ever Persona I ever played, that one definitely gave me a lot of trouble, and I would say that Persona 5 is a little easier than vanilla Persona 4, but it's still pretty damn challenging at times.
Yeah, Vanilla Persona 4 was also my first one, and since I had never played a Persona game before, I had to play it on easy mode, but even then, like, the difficulty wasn't very consistent.
Well, if there's something that makes Persona 5 a little bit more easy in the long haul than Persona 4, it's that it's a hell of a lot easier to get preemptive strikes in this game. Because they built a somewhat clunky but very satisfying system for sneak attacks in this game. To, in keeping with the whole Phantom Thief theme. So there's a cover system, there's back attacks and all of that. And I found myself, like, throughout the game, I only really rose the alert level by accident once or twice, and it was easy enough to get it back down. So it's not difficult to keep your stealth mojo going in this game, like, at all. So... I like how Ryuji's plan here is, okay, we walked back to school, and it isn't a castle. Let's walk back to school again. What was he expecting to happen?
Well, Ryuji's not
we
very
didn't expect
bright.
I
anything to
selected
happen.
that option.
More than we think it is? What do you think?
But yeah, considering the obtuse method that they used to get to the metaverse in this game, I'm kind of impressed that they managed to set it up in a way that makes sense for the characters to figure it out. Like, the first time they go to the metaverse, it was just an accident, because Kurusu happened to have his phone out when they said the keywords they needed for the first palace by accident in a conversation.
Didn't it say stuff like returned to the real world or
But Ryuji, what is real? How do you define real?
I think the biggest advantage of the Metaverse Navigator over the television thing from Persona 4, though, is that they didn't have to write around them getting their equipment into the Metaverse the way they did in Persona 4, which was dumb.
Yeah, TV world.
Now, it's like, we'll hide it under our school uniforms, no one will notice, except you're hiding, let's see, what are the weapons?
Swords.
A sword.
Golf clubs.
Chie can hide her boots. That's fine. What does Yosuke have? Yosuke has wrenches and like ninja swords.
Kanji
ninja
has the
knives.
folding chair.
Kanji has a folding chair.
Kanji has
which
the biggest weapons.
I mean, I suppose Kanji's base weapon, nobody would look twice at a guy carrying a folding chair around. It's kind of why they fold up. But
And I suppose Teddy is bringing all those giant claws around too.
well,
Yeah, you just go into Tunis and see a real bear carrying, like, weapons and stuff and dumping into a TV.
Nothing to see here. It's just an innocent cute bear.
and they just never address Naoto having a gun, even though having a gun in Japan is kind of goddamn difficult.
Yeah.
And they give those to junior detectives, whatever.
Junior detective.
The weapons in this game more or less make sense. Like, your guns are airsoft guns, and because you're in the metaverse, they function realistically. And you buy them from a model shop. Okay, that makes sense. And your first weapons just sort of manifest alongside your persona, which is a bit of a cop-out, but whatever.
I'm just imagining someone stumbling upon the group and seeing a big duffel bag full of guns.
Well, they're not real guns, so...
No,
I don't think Japan has that law where every model gun has to have a bright orange cap on the end. Because every time I see a model gun in any sort of Japanese media, it just looks like a regular gun.
The shadows started acting up, so I came here wondering what.
I mean, they are bringing weapons as well. Like, they have to bring... Like, Haru's bringing in big friggin' battle axes and shit, so... I'm sure they're toys from the airsoft shops. It's just a big novelty axe or whatever, but...
Yeah. Of course, by the time Haru is with you, you're basically gathering in Kurusu's bedroom. So... But, like, they don't have to explain away how they hide their weapons, because they can just grab their weapons and then warp. It's not really all that complicated. The one thing I did like that they had an explanation for was the dumbass stupid costumes. And I know some people rag on the stupid costumes, but, you know, it's a Phantom Thief game. They're going to have stupid costumes. It's kind of part of the trope. But I do like the costumes. In Persona 4 Golden, I always changed my my character's outfits to different clothing sets because I wanted to look cool. But in this game, I just sort of keep the default outfit because they're, for the most part, they're pretty slick and stylish.
Are they releasing costume packs for all the previous Persona games for this game?
They already did. Those were released in like weekly drip feeds over the first month. And they were, all of the costume packs are already out in Japan, so it's just a matter of, you know, releasing them. But they didn't release all of the DLC all at once because, number one, it would be too expensive to buy it all at once, and number two, the DLC personas kind of break the game, as I'll demonstrate in future parts. Especially the early game. Like, not so much the later game. When you get to the end game, the DLC personas are kind of well enough balanced for whatever level they're at. But the thing about the Persona Compendium, and this has been true since Persona 3, is that no matter what level you're at, you can, if you have enough money, you can always summon any persona of any level that you happen to have entered into the compendium. And your first purchase for all of the DLC personas is free. So you can just, as soon as you have access to the compendium, you can buy any DLC Persona you have and basically steamroller the game until you get to the point in the game where that Persona is at an even level with everything.
Yeah, you just look at which ones are the best ones and use your free purchase on those.
Yeah, more or less. I had Izanagi when I first started the game because it came with my pre-order. So the first boss was kind of pathetic, and I didn't realize until I had fought the first boss how game-breaking cross-slash would be. But yeah, it's basically giving you an end game level double attack physical skill. And physical skills are the endgame level stuff that works the best in the early game during a New Game Plus, because the cost is always a percentage of your HP, which changes according to your level rather than the skill. So, like, an endgame level spell is always going to cost 12 SP no matter what level you're at, but an endgame level physical skill will cost, like, 10 HP or something.
I love Kamoshida's warrior painting on the steps.
Yeah, that painting is actually surprisingly pretty cool looking. Of course, the joke is that on the reverse end is a picture of his shadow in the cape without a shirt on and looking all around disgusting. And the painting spins around because there's a hidden passageway in there. I thought that was a neat detail, and if there's one thing I can compliment Persona 5 on over all of the other Persona games, including 1 and 2, it's the dungeon design. And, you know, there are other games with better dungeons, but Persona 5 has some really good dungeons, and it does a pretty good job of tying the dungeon mechanics in with the character that formed the dungeon. Which I thought was nice. Like, some of the puzzles just relate to the way a particular person sees the world.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like I just want to go from one floor to the next. I'm doing puzzles and doing, like, little platforming sections.
Yeah.
A lot of variety.
And Persona 3 was just procedurally generated nonsense the whole time, and Persona 4 wasn't random, although people think it is, because it's just bland hallways, except for one floor around the midpoint of every dungeon where there is a kind of puzzle thing.
Yeah, there's always, like, 2 floors per dungeon that weren't, but they felt so similar, most people would think.
Yeah. Yeah, they're pre-designed. They just don't have much design in them, which is unfortunate. They're kind of like, I hesitate to make the comparison, but it's kind of like Conception. Conception 2 specifically. I haven't played much of that game, but it seemed to be the same thing, where they were just sort of hallways where you fought enemies. Which, to be fair, a lot of other RPGs have done well, but when a JRPG is doing a dungeon that doesn't have a whole lot of gameplay variety in it, it's usually good about making it at least appear to be an interesting environment to explore. So, of course, sometimes all the aesthetic excellence in the world can't save a dungeon's bland design. See any given segment in Final Fantasy XIII.
Wow, 4 whole experience.
And what was that, 149 yen?
But no magic fire rings.
It's like $1.50.
$1.
It's $1.50. I don't know the exact exchange rate of
My
of yen to
general rule
dollars
is
right
just
now,
move a
but-
decimal point 2 spaces over, and that'll give you a
Yeah,
generally
yeah.
good idea.
Generally floats around $1.
Yeah, generally. It fluctuates, but my rule of thumb has always been 100 yen equals $1.
Yeah, I definitely prefer the Persona 5 dungeons being like actual dungeons. Tokyo Mirage Sessions also had very unique special dungeons. They weren't just like randomly generated, and it made Tokyo Mirage Sessions a lot more enjoyable between battles. And again, that's pretty standard for most RPGs. It's like Persona is kind of unique in that it had randomly generated dungeons for the most part, except for Persona 1 and 2. But I love it. It adds to all the depth of all the characters and the shadows and having all these different like contraptions and all these different things going on in the dungeons. It adds a lot.
Yeah, it's just like for a long time Persona held on to its very bland dungeon design philosophy, mostly because Atlus has the most experience with basic labyrinth dungeon design, and by labyrinth dungeon, I mostly mean those goddamn first-person hallway dungeons that haven't been cool since the 80s.
And it was always like a budget reason. Like Persona 3 was not, they didn't have a lot of money to make Persona 3, so they did the most stylish thing they could with what little money they had.
Well, Persona 4 didn't have much money either until they got to Golden anyway.
Yeah, but Persona 4 had the advantage of being built on top of a pre-existing game engine that they spent most of Persona 3's development perfecting. So, and there's a lot of actually kind of cool design stuff in Persona 3's cutting room floor backlog. Like, there's footage on YouTube of old beta versions of the game, and you can find information on stuff they had planned, like previous versions of the protagonist, or the early version of the female protagonist that didn't make the final cut. Kind of like the original Pokemon, actually, in that respect, because Pokemon was supposed to have a female protagonist too, but I think it was cut for space reasons.
Yeah, space and a little bit of translation reasons.
Yeah, and they added that back in Leaf Green and Fire Red.
Yeah. Well, they technically added it back in Crystal, but yeah.
Well, Crystal wasn't red and blue.
Yeah, but they added
they brought
it back
they brought the idea back, but they added the actual design, the character design that they had planned but didn't use back into Fire Red and Leaf Green.
Yeah. Because you can see like early promotional artwork with the female protagonist involved.
Yeah. And then they remade Gold and Silver and added a different female protagonist for some reason. I don't get why they did that.
Yeah.
No one gets that one either.
They did?
Yeah, the female in Crystal that they added is a very different character and design from what they added for Heart Gold, Soul Silver.
Looks much more cheery.
Yeah, and they didn't include the Crystal story content either, which is bizarre.
That's weird.
Yeah, it's strange, but someone thought it was a good idea for some reason. Just fuck me if I know what it is. Anyway, yeah, this entire cutscene is here to establish that there are certain rooms within dungeons that can be used as save points. And quick travel points, in fact, which is a godsend. It makes exploring the dungeons a lot more efficient than getting from floor to floor quickly in Persona 4. And Persona 3 had quick travel points throughout the tower, but it was usually on boss floors, and boss floors only, which was unfortunate because some of the side quests actually required you to go to specific floors and farm for rare treasure chests, and that was annoying. And hey, I brought a fake gun. At least you weren't stupid enough to wave it around in a mall food court like that other guy I could talk about.
And at least his reasoning makes some amount of sense, even if it is still kind of stupid.
Well, Ryuji's reasoning is, hey, it looks like a real gun. You can use this to scare people off, which is a real thing that people do in the real world with model guns in Japan.
Or at least causes them to pause for a second to give you an advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, there's this whole subplot in one of the confidants about a Yakuza guy who wants to bulk order a bunch of really realistic-looking model guns to sort of pull the wool over the eyes of people because he screwed up and fucked up a deal to get real guns. It makes more sense in context.
Use all the save slots.
And I probably just spoiled that one for people who've even beaten the game, because that particular confidant is hard to get. Like, I only got halfway through it by the end of the game because it was so late in the game that I made the requirement to actually start it up.
Yeah. You're not badass enough to confront this guy that, hey, you put a gun in my bag. Why?
You need level 4 guts to get the goddamn confidant started. So the upshot is, toward the beginning of the game, he gives you a bag, and you don't have guts to talk to him about it, and he asks you to return it to him, by the way, until the end of the game, probably, unless you really, really grind up your guts early on. And then a few ranks in, you need maxed out guts, so there's a roadblock after the roadblock. It's vexing.
So the road's under construction, you're saying?
Yeah.
I love
God.
Morgana's running animation there.
The little swirly feet.
So cute.
Her Sonic the Hedgehog running.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, they're
Yeah.
putting that, at the time of this recording, they're putting that 25th anniversary of First Four Figures. Swirly Feet Sonic is like, god damn it, his first 4 figures is going to be stupid expensive, but I'd want it.
Speaking of Sonic, since Atlas is owned, presumably since Atlas is owned by the same holding company as Sega now, they slipped in a surprising number of Sega franchise references. Like, there's Yakuza references, there's a Sonic reference or two. It's surprising.
I look forward to protagonist of Morgana appearing in Sega and Sonic All-Stars Racing 3.
Yeah.
I really thought it was fun that they had Futaba talk about Super Smash Brothers, but they called it like Super Bash Brothers, and they were talking about, like, she made a comment about the hype trailers for like new characters of Super Bash Brothers, and I thought that was hilarious.
Futaba is the one allowed internet meme culture reference character in this game, by the way, because she's basically a shut-in who lives on the internet, so it makes sense for her to talk that way. Like, when other games do it with other characters that it doesn't make sense for them to do it, it just makes me cringe. In any case, do you see how fast my health is going down in these pissy beginning of game random battles?
Hard mode.
Yeah, that's the hard mode showing, alright.
I assume you didn't equip any of the weapons or armor that you kept from the last game.
No. I made it a rule not to equip something unless I could currently buy it in shops. So if I already own it but can buy it in a shop, I'll equip it, but for the most part I'm going to stick to the equipment that the game wants me to use. Or
Alrighty.
just stuff that I find in the treasure chests. But since I can use anything that I can technically buy in shops, all of my old SP Adhesive 3s are fair game. So SP management is not going to be a problem for this playthrough. And I'll get into that when we get into the actual dungeon crawls, because it's kind of a big part of the game.
New Game Plus, I always tackle the shadows in one day. It's like, oh no, the character's gone missing. It's okay. It's solved.
Yukiko's missing! Yukiko's missing!
You know what I like about this opening area with all the combat, though? At this point in the game, if we were playing Persona 3, we'd still be fighting the goddamn ice cream scoops. But since they've introduced the demons again, we've got like 5 different enemy types that we've all fought. And since there's that Shin Megami Tensei Pokemon-like enemy collection mechanic going on from the mainline series, every enemy is interesting in that, hey, this is something I could potentially use. So not only are you finding ways to kill them, but you're also paying attention to what their abilities are, so that you can decide whether or not you might want to use them for yourself. And I say Pokemon-like as a frame of reference because more people know about Pokemon, but technically SMT did this kind of shit first.
Yeah. Tons of RPGs do this now.
And Pokemon's just the framing device for everyone to know.
Yeah.
Like Final Fantasy 13-2 is a monster collection system too, so...
Yeah. Monster collection. Yeah, you know what made me laugh about Final Fantasy 13 and 13-2 is that, like, the summoning mechanic in Final Fantasy 13 reminded me so goddamn much of summoning Personas in Persona 4, but then they went and did Shin Megami Tensei monster collecting in the sequel, and I'm just like, are you doing this shit on purpose, or what? Anyway, it's time for another tutorial. This is where we find out that model guns work like real guns in the metaverse. And it's actually a fairly clever explanation. I mean, alright, Persona 1 had guns for just no real reason. But, you know, the city was in lockdown, so what the fuck. But Persona 3 and Persona 4 bug me in the sense that, okay, you have this robot who can buy Gatling gun attachments from the local police officer, and then you've got Naoto in Persona 4 who can buy handguns in a country where, you know, gun control is like, the gun control laws in Japan would scare the American South out of their pants. So, yeah.
Well, now that we have our gun, I do have to ask the protagonist, if some gangster is our fly girl, what should we do? Spray all of the guns! Oh, and I timed that perfectly, too. Nice.
What made that meme so great for me was the attention to detail. Because shotguns, Ryuji's shotgun only has 2 bullets, but the guy in the clip fired 3 times, so the ammo
So it went to
-1. Yeah. Oh, man. But you know, it's refreshing to see a game that hit the meme button so hard, but you know, it's so much more than the memes. I just really appreciate that. Like,
yeah, I think Persona 4 strayed into that a little bit.
well, yeah, but that's partly because of Hayam Daisy's comics, just making fun of the most hilarious parts of the game, and the voice dubbing for the comic being so goddamn memorable.
For real?
But, you know, you never really saw all that many memes about specific parts of the game. Just the comic, you know? And, yeah, that drew people to the game, and I'm glad for that, but Persona 5 has so much to it that you can make really original stuff out of it, like that Simpsons clip. I mean, that's not just amusing, but it took some actual goddamn work to make. So it's impressive from that standpoint, too.
I always think about, like, what would games' reactions to them be like if they were released when Twitter was a thing, you know?
Yeah, like on 64 or PS1 games.
Yeah, like, how would Twitter be making memes out of those kinds of games? Because you can still play them now. You can still make jokes about these games now, sure, but they're not on the public limelight. It's not like all these top gaming industry people and all these, you know, high schoolers or whatever are playing it all now because it's the hot new thing. And
yeah, when those kind of jokes arise around older games, it's usually in some YouTube reviewer's video, and when that happens, the joke belongs to that reviewer, basically. Like, if someone's referencing it, they aren't referencing the game, they're referencing that reviewer.
I think the last one I can remember anyone even trying to do was GoldenEye in real life. Where basically they had actors, quote unquote, or I guess just, you know, friends or whatever, do the animations in real life. So he would, like, shoot a guard, he would flop to the ground, and then awkwardly snap back to attention, and then slowly fall back down again.
That's great.
Oh, man. Yeah. Although, there are some, like, there's 1 or 2, like, movie projects that have tried to do a first-person shooter perspective as a serious artsy thing. And I'm just like,
Doom.
No, don't do that.
what was that movie that came out, like, a year or 2 ago?
Oh, was it the action one with the...
Yeah, he was entirely first person. Like, he was jumping out of planes and
Hardcore
stuff.
Henry?
But, like, Hardcore Henry, that's
the one. Yeah,
I was
that's the
thinking,
one I'm thinking of, too.
I was thinking, that looks like the greatest Sega CD movie I've ever seen.
What it looked,
Too dizzy for my eyes, though. Ugh.
what it looked like to me was like a CGI trailer that you might see at E3 for a game that's still in production. You know, a trailer that's trying to look like the game but doesn't. Or, you know, if you're gonna get really ambitious, a trailer that looks like the game would have been if it ever came out, like Prey 2's trailer.
Seeming like everything Ubisoft produces.
I'll reveal your true form.
It does kind of annoy me that this game has 2 protracted tutorial dungeon segments. Not counting the one previous, which was more or less just an interactive cutscene with a few battles thrown in. But Persona 4 had the one tutorial dungeon sequence that led into the boss fight with Chie, and this one's got the one that leads into the sub-boss that Ryuji awakens before you fight it, and then it has a second one for An, which I get is necessary from a narrative standpoint, but there's a lot of tutorial to get through before you actually get to the unrestrained gameplay. And to be fair, once you get to that unrestrained gameplay, it's goddamn glorious.
Okay.
Like, it just stops the action so much just to go, okay, now we have to show this new thing.
Yeah, I do appreciate that they made this whole dungeon area for the tutorial section, and I think you can come back down here when you get to the dungeon properly. There's just no real reason to.
Yeah.
The enemies are piss easy to kill, and I think the only things to find are possibly a couple of junk treasure items.
Listen, there's a
Oh, and this is where we learn about negotiation. Now, I'm glad they brought negotiation back because it has that effect of giving each demon their own personality. And, you know, it's kind of an illusion because there aren't really all that many personalities between the demons. Like, there's a bunch of stock personalities, and once you start recognizing the stock personalities, you'll start to understand which responses those stock personalities like, and it's something that gets easier as you get used to it. Oh wait, no, this isn't negotiation. This is just all-out attack. Why did we need an all-out attack for a frickin' pixie?
Yeah, we don't learn about negotiation until Kanji's in the party. That's gonna be the next dungeon part.
Kanji?
Oh, sorry, Ryuji.
He kind of is
He's
like...
blonde, and I got the last two letters mixed up.
You're saying I like dudes.
That's kind of like how I confused Yusuke and Yosuke when I first met Yusuke.
Well, I don't really get confused with Yusuke though, because Yusuke is a name I know from Yu Yu Hakusho. But you know, Ryuji is kind of like Kanji mechanically, not just by appearance. Like, yeah, he's got the delinquent look, and he's got a heavy weapon that isn't all that far removed from the folding chair when you think about it. But he's also got the lightning persona, which was Kanji's thing as well.
Yeah,
and
he's a pretty good melee guy. Like, he's
yeah.
still physically strong by the end of the game.
And he's got a heavy emphasis on physical attacks, and his shotgun has high damage output for a firearm. So, his mechanics are very Kanji Tatsumi. But personality-wise, he's kind of more like Yosuke.
Yeah,
like a less carefree version of Yosuke.
So Yosuke and Kanji did a fusion dance.
Yeah, kind of. Ryuji's also a character that will seriously annoy you toward the midpoint of the game because, well, that's where his stupid factor gets pretty strong, and it's not played for laughs. It's like him being legitimately stupid in a way that's harmful to the team. I mean, he comes to realize it, so there's character development there, but you're gonna not like him very much around that time.
But how does this train us for the volleyball tournament?
This is the part of the dungeons where you start to see actual visual representations of different things that the palace shadows actually feel and think. And in this case, it's torturing the volleyball team members because Kamoshida, and they were really, really deliberate about this, they made Kamoshida an asshole to literally everyone in some form or fashion. So he's not just that pervert who hits on girls who are younger than him or who harasses them. He's also that guy.
I get older, but they all stay the same age.
Yeah, he's also that guy who abuses his male volleyball students because he has a bad temper, and he's also that guy who tries to wreck everything he doesn't agree with. So he basically killed off the goddamn track team and broke Ryuji's leg, and now he's trying to expose your criminal record so that you'll have the worst possible time at school. So
he's a piece of shit, is what we're saying. He's a piece of shit.
He's a piece of shit, but he's a piece of shit in every conceivable direction. No matter who you are, there is a reason for you to hate this guy. And they made it that way on purpose because, like, from the player's point of view, there's always going to be something that you care about less, even if logically you acknowledge it as a bad thing, but it doesn't necessarily evoke the strongest emotional reaction from you. Like, you know, the whole physical abuse for a volleyball team kind of thing. In your head, you might be thinking, hey, that's goddamn awful. But it might not strike you as strongly as the sexual abuse or the sneaking around trying to expose this kid's criminal record when he hasn't done anything wrong yet. Or the blackmail thing that he does with Mishima to get him to do that. or the trying to get on to sleep with him in order to keep her friend on the team bit that we'll be finding out about next part. That's another thing that might hit you more strongly than the other thing. Or the volleyball team might be the thing that hits you the strongest. Maybe that's just what you relate to. But there's something that relates strongly to pretty much everyone in some form or fashion. So there's an emotional connection point somewhere, no matter where that connection point needs to be for a viewer. And that makes Kamoshida a really effective villain here.
Yeah, and as an opening dungeon plot line, I think it's a good way to start the game off, to give you an idea of what the Phantom Thieves are going to be rebelling and fighting against, and what they need to stop, and the kind of psychological stuff that's going on in this game. So it's a good opening dungeon.
It's also the logical starting point, because when you're dealing with a story about rebellious teenagers, the starting point is always going to be the adult that broke their trust in adults. You know? And Kamoshida, for these characters, is that person. I mean, they had reasons to mistrust adults before this, but here's this guy that the whole school holds up as an example, and, you know, everyone is supposed to respect, and he's doing all this shit behind everyone's back. And that is the kind of thing from a teenager's point of view that will inspire a fuck adults mindset. And this game does a pretty good job of establishing that mindset before challenging it later on in the game.
Oh, God!
This was... Okay, I'm not gonna lie, this is kind of a ridiculous image, but...
I'm sorry, is Waka on the other end throwing these at him?
But, like, the sound effects that plays when that ball hits almost made me feel physically ill when I watched this the first time. It's like, it's a cartoonish image, but even with the fixed camera perspective, it's not portrayed in a cartoonish way. Like, you're supposed to feel the impact of that. And
I'm sorry, Morgana's like, her voiceover. What are your thoughts?
I think this is absolutely ridiculous.
This is just... It's a cartoonishly ridiculous image, but it's also portrayed in a way that makes you really, really not like it. Like, it hits you. It punches you in the gut. It's a very punchy, ridiculous image that hits your feels rather than your funny bone. And I think that's a really...
Why can't it do both?
Yeah, well... You know, you can find some dark humor in it, but because of the context and because of the way it's presented, it's also a very serious thing to you. And I think that's a balance that Persona games really need to nail if they're going to keep using the personal shadow angle of storyline for their plots.
Let's go.
That'll be interesting to see what they do whenever they get to an eventual Persona 6 in however many years it is.
We'll see. The Persona games take a long time to come out, though.
Oh, that's why I said just whenever they get to it.
Yeah. We're probably not going to see one until at least the next generation at this point, because they spend a lot of time conceptualizing these games. Like, a ridiculous amount of time in a Persona game's development cycle is given to figuring out what kind of story they want to tell and how they want to present it. And there are a lot of things that get reworked during development. Like, the culprit from Persona 4 was at one point in development supposed to be Dojima, which is why his persona was a warped version of Izanagi. But that was changed, and at one point, Nanako looked a lot more like a tomboy character.
I thought you were going to say Nanako was going to be the killer. I was like, what?
Every day has to be great at your Shunes. If you're not happy, I'll put a smile on your face.
Nanako looked a little less like an adorable little girl and more like a cool little girl, which wouldn't have given her the same kind of personality she ended up with. I'm kind of glad that things fell together the way that they did. But they had some interesting ideas going on in their beta phases. Anyway, it's time for Ryuji to awaken, and they sort of play around with the same kind of awakening scheme that they used in Persona 4, where something that you didn't know about this person is laid bare in front of you. But instead of Ryuji's shadow telling him this, it's Kamoshida, the guy who caused it all to happen. Which I think adds a fairly interesting dynamic, because when Ryuji and An awaken, they do so in confrontations with Kamoshida's shadow, and it happens at a point where Kamoshida is basically telling him everything he thinks about them and getting them all riled up about it.
Ryuji, move!
We can take these guys.
Ugh, no, we can't.
I mean, they're just demon horses from hell.
Now, these shadows are annoying enough when you have to actually fight them for real, but the real danger in the first dungeon is going to be the knights with the spears, the Eligors. I think the Eligors. Maybe it's another knight shadow. It's a little difficult. I can never.
Eligor
really...
sounds right.
Yeah, there's basically this one shadow that hits like a motherfucking truck in hard mode, and it gives me quite a bit of trouble in future parts until I basically stumble upon its weak point. But yeah, this battle is just a cutscene where you automatically
Tutorial
lose.
fight.
Not even a tutorial fight, just an automatic death scene.
The end.
Great game.
I paid $60 for this.
This game has a great game over theme, and I'm actually kind of glad that I game overed at one point in a future part so that I could show it off. You'll see.
I bet you simply came here on a whim and ended up like this. Isn't that right?
Oh man, that unpleasant feeling when the bad guy hits the nail on the head.
Getting emotional so quick.
Yeah, we just sort of came here and ended up like this.
Though it was only
Uh,
temporary. Have you forgotten my
Yeah, not the smartest thing we've ever done now that I'm thinking about it.
It wasn't no practice, it was physical abuse. You just didn't like our team.
Yeah, that's right. Kamoshida was made the temporary coach of the track team, and apparently he got the track team coach fired over a disagreement because that coach actually stood up to him. So not only is Kamoshida mistreating his students, he actually lost one of his colleagues a career as well. There's another emotional connection point where you can find a reason to hate Kamoshida, basically no matter who you are.
The track team is gone too because of this asshole.
The reasons just keep piling up.
That's why.
And like, the story emphasizes the ones that make sense for these teenage characters to hate, but there are other reasons too as you learn more about the guy.
Ryuji!
I like how you get two dialogue options that basically mean the same thing.
I'll never get
And I realize why they do that. It's because they don't want the main character to speak without player input, so they give you a very thin illusion of choice at the times when he's supposed to talk.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
No, that's what you are. All you think of
At the same time, though, you don't necessarily have to make a protagonist silent in order to have these kind of choices. It's just that the more you make them talk, the more set in stone their voice becomes. So you get a situation like Horizon Zero Dawn where the dialogue choices don't really seem to mean much to who the character is, because she's always talking no matter what. And by the time you have a dialogue choice, you're pretty sure you have a solid idea of who she is, and you're just sort of giving it a slight coating of flavor.
Oh god, Ryuji's head's gonna explode.
Yeah, the awakenings can get kind of goddamn disturbing.
You actually achieved human level intelligence. You can't handle it.
But like, he's not just sweating, he's got tears coming out of his eyes, he's got drool down his mouth. And this happens every time a character awakens in this goddamn game. I think the only time you don't see it is Haru.
And Goro, but
Well, yeah. I like how they basically go Super Saiyan when they transform, though. Like, there's this big cyclone of wind. That never happened in the previous games either. I also like how Ryuji's persona looks like a goddamn robot master.
Well, Pirate Man, yeah.
Okay. Crossbones Man. I don't know. Has there been a Pirate Man?
Yeah, Mega
Yeah.
Man base.
Oh.
yeah, he's weak to Dynamo Man.
Okay. Sure.
Alright, Ryuji, your heart fiddly dee. Being a pirate is alright with me, because it gets us out of the situation.
I like how the knight transformed into another knight. Okay. What was the point of that?
Yeah, here's
I mean-
Eligor.
Now, this isn't the one that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the one that you encounter in random battles. Although this guy hits like a truck in hard mode, too. Like, you're not likely to lose this battle, but you're probably going to lose one of your party members, because, goddamn. It's not really important to keep your party members alive in this particular battle, because I don't think you get any experience for these Awakening boss battles. Which is pretty much the exact opposite of Persona 1, because when there was an Awakening battle in Persona 1, even though they were basically cutscenes, every party member you had with you would get an automatic level up for some reason. Which was bizarre. But that led to an exploit where, like, if you knew an Awakening was coming up, you could just grind every character up to the next level before the Awakening, and then you go through the Awakening, and then you get another level instantly.
Well, hey, it's a smart thing to do, so...
Yeah. Like I said, he hits like a truck. And at this point, like, the only healing methods you have are the medicine items, which are actually really good at this point in the game, and Morgana's Dia spell, which doesn't heal a whole lot.
Yeah, I haven't played any of the Persona games on hard mode. Anytime I play, it's always on normal mode, so this will be interesting to see how hard these Shin Megami Tensei games get.
Nope, Ryuji.
Ryuji lost almost half of his health in one hit there, and he's the physical character.
You just woke up, man.
Now, I must confess, I was playing this game pretty late at night and was getting a little tired at this point in the session, which is why I used the Aha spell after I already knew it wouldn't be the best spell to use there. I was just sort of on autopilot at that point, and it was a mistake. I'll try not to make mistakes like that in the future, but I can already picture the comment section blowing up at me over it.
He's gotta wake up, get out there.
Yeah.
Because we're Sonic Heroes!
Because you don't even have a name, you're just guard captain. What chance do you have?
I like how all of the sub-bosses in Kamoshida's palace have this melodramatic, "But how could I lose?" Or, "How could you stand up to King Kamoshida?" in those, like, Shatner stutter voices. Like, it's not something that happens through the game, just through this particular palace. Like, I'm wondering if they did that on purpose, like, to imply something else about Kamoshida's mindset, but who knows.
Seems you still don't understand.
Oh yeah, and this is where we're introduced to the concept of Cognitions, which is an entirely new thing that they added to Persona 5. Apart from, the personas in the shadows, there are Cognitions, which are just sort of illusionary people that are made out of people's minds. They're not shadows, they're just reflections of whatever that person thinks about another person. These didn't appear in Persona 4. In Persona 4 it was basically just, you got thrown into the TV world took a different shape depending on who you were, and your shadow popped out and taunted you a bunch. But in the palaces things get a lot more involved, both in terms of design and in terms of what shows up in cutscenes. So all of the volleyball team members were Cognitions as well, and there's this cognitive version of An that just sort of cuddles with Kamoshida's shadow every now and then.
Because why not?
Why not, indeed?
Women aren't drawn to punks like you.
Dude, my charm stat is through the roof!
Yeah, I've got Gary Stu powers out the wazoo here. You don't have a place to talk, Kamoshida. Like, I bet if I just said the right words right now, all of your reason would flee your head, and you would bow down before me.
You just look in her direction, she's like, screw Kamoshida.
Actually, the reason that you have to max out your charm stats in this game is kind of amusing. Like, you have to do it for Makoto's confidant, but it's not because Makoto is shallow, it's because her friend is shallow, and they're trying to convince her friend to have a double date for reasons. It makes a hell of a lot of sense, but it's simultaneously a hell of a lot more cynical than just, oh, Yukari won't date you because your charm stat isn't high enough. I like the logical explanations that they came up with for you needing to have a particular personality stat at a certain level to do a certain confidant. It's like every aspect of the social links in this game is just a lot better thought out than in previous games, and it adds a lot more depth to the story aspect of it.
Should I be happy about that?
But what I like the most about the personality stats in this game is the emphasis on it being for a particular purpose in every case. Because that adds to the idea that your main character isn't just, you know, this pretty boy who's good at everything. All of this stuff that you're building up is for a particular skill. It's a social skill, and you're using them to solve problems, you know?
Becomes a threat to them? This happens. It's to prevent you from being affected by distortions.
Is
Okay.
this a skull?
Your appearance
Another thing that I kind of like is that most of the most of the costumes. I'm sorry, I think superheroes when I think costumes this dumb. But, most of the costumes that your characters use say something about those particular characters. And they're usually, in some sense, them taking control of the thing that bothers them. For example, Ryuji here is viewed as a thug and a delinquent, so he gets a thuggish, delinquent-like costume with a skull for a mask. And even though he doesn't like his reputation in the real world, when the time comes to choose his codename, he very enthusiastically picks the name Skull. So the costume is in some sense a vision of them taking advantage of the thing that they might not necessarily like about themselves, or in some other fashion, it's an expression of what they think looks cool and aesthetically appealing.
What you could say is that it's their thief persona.
Well, yeah, that's basically what it is. The persona is you taking control of your shadow. So in the case of this game, and it's not like it's partially explained when they talk about the persona being the shadow, because they do recap that plot point from Persona 4 several times, but they never explain the significance of the costumes beyond it being an expression of what you think rebellion looks like. But, like, you get stuff like An, and her costume is a skin-tight catsuit, and her weapon is a whip. And she expresses discomfort over this multiple times. But when you consider what she was rebelling against at the time she awakened, it makes a lot of sense. And then you get Makoto, whose costume is this hardcore biker girl outfit. And she's the student council president who's perfect at everything, and nobody would picture her as a biker girl. It's strange, but it's nice. But it's interesting to think about the significance of every character's costume, and I think that's a job well done on the writer's parts and the designer's parts. But like the one that doesn't really say anything specific is the protagonist's, because his is just a long coat and a stylish mask and a handkerchief in the pocket. All it really says is gentleman thief.
Thank God, we're back. Yeah, I dragged you around a lot, huh?
We almost got killed, you know.
You know, this alley is like right across the street from the school. Like anyone walking down the stairs there would see them just sort of pop into reality. So when I think about it, this is not the best place to be hiding when we're warping in and out of the universe. Just saying, yeah, maybe we better move to a more secluded alleyway, maybe? Oh wait, no, we don't have to worry about it. None of those people have eyes.
What's wrong with all of your faces?
Now, you can play this version of Kurusu as a massive dick, but not in the same sense that you could with Narukami and Arisato. When you were being a jerk in Persona 3, you were mostly being a disinterested, disaffected, gloomy guy, and in Persona 4, you were just kind of being a snarky ass. In Persona 5, you have the choice between being an actual asshole and making a lot of smart remarks. Like, you can be a real smart aleck, and sometimes I will choose those options because they're just irresistible. But, I don't know, I just find the choices that they give you for not being an all-around nice guy in this game more interesting. But one thing that I definitely find interesting, and we'll be seeing this later on when we get into Confidants, is that you aren't expected to be a complete yes man this time around. And it was something that threw me off initially, because in Personas 3 and 4, to get the most points out of your confidant ranks, you basically had to agree with whatever the other person was saying. And that's not always the case here. Like, if you were honest and straight up told the social links in previous games what you thought of the situation, even if that was a critical thought, you'd probably lose out on points. But in this game, it's usually the way to get the best points.
You could have gone about it that way. However, you did not. There are merits in having associates. That's what you decided.
Yeah, you know, maybe because I'm a teenager. And, you know...
Power of friendship.
First social link.
I think the jarring thing about that, about those cutaways at the beginning of the Confidants is that sometimes, there's always an accusatory tone to those particular cutaways, and it's always Sai Nijima laying it on really goddamn thick. But most of the cutaways for the main plot have her gradually softening up toward you. So whenever you start a Confidant in the late game, it's like suddenly she has mood whiplash and decides to go full bad cop mode on you. It's like, what? Weren't you just telling me a few seconds ago that you're starting to believe me?
Answer me.
What's this? Come on.
Meat, man.
Yeah.
I don't swing that way, Ryuji.
Yeah, that's a bit of Chie shining through there. If you didn't think Chie's carnivore stuff was overbearing in Persona 4, Persona 4 Arena and Persona Q are right there to make you sick of it, though.
I was gonna say she isn't overbearing in the original Persona 4 at all.
Yeah.
The fact that becomes a thing in like Labyrinth, Shadow of the Labyrinth, and Arena, and Dancing All Night is so obnoxious. It's just like, we get it. She loves meat.
Yeah.
She barely talks about meat in the actual game. I mean, she does talk about it, but still.
Yeah, it's a part of her character, and it's not as overbearing as Yukiko with her laughter thing. But the thing about Persona Q in particular, and also the other spin-offs, but mostly Persona Q, is that they really put the writing B team on it, and you can tell because like everyone has one character trait, and they run that one trait into the ground. And I'm not exaggerating when I say it's kind of like reading a fan fiction.
Yeah. Hey guys, did you know that Akihiko likes protein? He's gonna mention protein again.
What the hell, man? You better taste your food.
Or he's gonna mention training again, or he's gonna get all gung-ho about fighting again.
Just let me do it.
Basically, it's like they only ever watched his introduction cutscene from Persona 3, and maybe the one cutscene where he takes protein, and decided to make that his entire character.
Yeah. Like, at least with Chie, I know I've heard her mention meat in Persona 4. With Akihiko, I don't remember him saying the word protein. So, like, when I played Persona Q, I was like, was he ever talking about protein? And I'm sure if I replay 3 now, I'll hear it, I'll find it, but, like...
Yeah, it happens, like, one time. And it's
Yeah.
like, and it's in a sensible place where I think it's, like, in his room, maybe, where he's got all this training equipment set up. It might be something that happened in Persona 3 Portable more often, since you can actually social link with him, but I think it might be something, like in the original game, I think it's something that you get off the security cameras. Because, you know, at certain points in the game you get recordings of all of them in their different rooms doing something wacky or character developy, which was Persona 3 FES's apology for not developing the characters enough in the first place. Oh god, here we go. This plot point is starting. This made me feel legitimately uncomfortable because the moment this character stepped on screen, I knew exactly where it was going. But yeah, this is Shiho, and she is like the game's failsafe. Like, if you didn't have a reason to hate Kamoshida for some reason yet, this is the game's reason to make sure you know he's an asshole. Like, if for some reason you're such a cynical ass that none of the other reasons the game gives you to hate him were enough. And it would have been too much, but they handled it surprisingly well in ways that I didn't expect to like. for example, they didn't do the obvious thing and make Shiho a social link, which I kind of expected them to do, but they didn't. You find out a lot about what happens to her after this through An, but if they had made her a social link, that would have brought a lot of uncomfortable stuff into the gameplay. Like, basically, it's hard to explain why that would have made me uncomfortable, but I think part of the reason is that with a confidant, your main character is always expected to take front row seat and take a driving force role in whatever the confidant's problem is. And I think it would have felt too much like a storyline about fixing Shiho, which would have opened about 6 different cans of worms all at once. So I'm glad they sidestepped that potential landmine. But they also made the storyline that you actually do see regarding Shiho really well done and kind of inspiring. Because when you don't see Shiho again until like the end of An's social link. You don't see her in person again until then, I should say. And by then it's actually kind of heartening to see her better, you know? And that happened on her own, and it gives the character this feeling of having her own life somewhere else while everything else is happening, which is not something you usually get from a Persona game. It's something that I usually associate more with Trails in the Sky, that kind of thing.
Life is not a free run right now. Well, yeah, all the not so subtle imagery whenever I do anything is really driving that point home.
Also, the text messaging.
So many memes.
Okay, I get it. Persona 5, you're modern, okay? We did this song and dance in Catherine too, but I swear, like, half the game is staring at this goddamn text message screen, and all I can say is that, goddamn, Kurusu, where did you get this text message app? Where did you get this theme? Like, I've never seen such a stylish-looking text message app.
Get on it, web developers.
Well, someone is actually trying to develop this text messaging style in real life.
Yeah, I've seen, like, Persona 5-style themes for mobile phones now, and they look really slick. But it's kind of limited at this point. You need, like, third-party apps for it to work.
Yeah.
Like, I think to get this whole thing working, like, perfectly, you'd need, like, you need an entire Android interface app. And, you know, you can switch those out as easy as you switch your wallpapers, almost. But you need, like, a dedicated GUI program for your phone that did all this stuff. It wouldn't be something you could just slap into your current touchscreen interface.
But yeah, high school students spending all their time on their phones texting, yeah, that's believable. So.
Yeah, as soon as Makoto joins your party, like, every conversation, she cuts in. She's like, we're in class, could you stop this now?
It's also a good way to, like, have more exposition in a way that, like, with Persona 3 and 4, they didn't really text. I mean, they could call each other, they could text, but it was never, like, they never had, like, a screen for it.
Well, the real thing, though, that this does for you is, in Personas 3 and 4, there was always this dedicated cutscene for every party member that you were about to rank up with, walking up to you, one after the other, in the hallway, and saying, hey, can we spend time together today?
That too.
Now they've just put it into this messaging system, which works out really well. It's a whole lot more organic that way, because, you know, people just sending you texts, that happens in the real world. But just, you know, you're hanging out in this one specific hallway every other Tuesday, and they all line up in single file to walk up to you and tell you that they're ready to rank up with you now, please. It got a little repetitive and not at all natural after a while.
Yeah.
Probably just sets up a stall outside of his house that says protagonist rank up. 5 cents.
But with, like, the group messaging stuff, it also allows them to have more conversations about the things that are currently going on without having to have, like, okay, they meet up on the roof again, or they meet up here again.
Yeah. Of course, Persona 5 also gives you another way to track whether or not a given social link is about to rank up with you. If you go into the quick travel map and check each area in turn with the square button, you can see which social links are available in that location on that specific day, and whether or not they're going to rank up with you. This is especially important in Persona 5 because the schedule for social links changes every month.
That is so convenient. I love the fact that not only it's like, what's his face? Is Mishima out today? I'll look in the map. No, Mishima's not out today. So, okay, I don't have to go to that one particular spot. And if he is out today, rank up. If I talk to him, cool, I'll talk to him right now, because then boom.
Yeah.
And that way, like, when you actually have, like, the fortune teller who can help raise your social stats, your social interaction between characters. If someone doesn't have a max up, you go to the fortune teller, you tell them to raise your affinity with that particular character, and you go spend your time with someone who will max up, you know? I like having that kind of convenience to know what I should focus my time on so I don't take too many wasted trips.
Yeah, and at some points you actually do want to specifically go hang out with a character that won't rank up so that you can experiment with the hangout system, which I thought was pretty interesting. But we'll be seeing that later on. Anyway, Igor is talking at us, and by this point in the game I was starting to notice that Igor's personality was a bit off. Like, it's not just his voice, the things he says are out of character from what I'm used to. And I thought maybe it was a case of bad writing, but as I started to listen to the things he was saying, I realized it was deliberate. Like, it was very, very deliberate.
Why would you say that exactly?
Well, we'll see by the end of the game.
Spoilers.
Major
Alright,
spoilers. Oh, man. But yeah, now we're learning about confidants. And you might ask why the goddamn name change from social links. I mean, social links is so, you know, pop culturally accepted by now, right? Everyone knows what a social link is, even if they've never touched Persona 4 in their life.
I'm still calling them social links.
They're not the same social purpose.
They aren't the same social purpose, yeah. The name is obviously playing in with the whole criminal aspect because they're your confidant. You know, they're basically one step away from being an accomplice. But they're also more cynical in tone. You were told by Igor here that you should use these people to gain skills and advantages, which is totally different in intent from Igor in previous games telling you that the power of friendship makes your heart stronger, and you should totally do that because it'll make your personas more powerful. But the interesting thing about starting from such a goddamn cynical perspective is that, like, the early social link ranks in this game are all cynical as fuck. But by the time you get to rank 6, 7, 8, 9, and finally 10, every single goddamn confidant story is so goddamn heartwarming. And, you know, there are a few weaker ones. There are always those weaker social links that don't really have as strong a storyline as the others in these games, but it's because you start from a very self-centered perspective that the emotional parts of these stories come out and hit you a bit harder when they happen. Like, it could be something like Kawakami's confidant starting off in a way that makes you think it's going to be all kinds of perverted, wacky hijinks, and then turning out 3 social links in to be really goddamn serious. God damn it, why did you hit my feels so hard? But,
It's also kind of interesting that you're not just making, like, confidants with just, like, random people at school, like, the girl in drama club and stuff. Like, every single one of these people have some kind of use and utility to you, which makes it a lot more fun to do social links, because now you actually have an incentive to help out everyone, because it'll actually help you in gameplay and in dungeons and in time management and in all these different things that 3 and 4 didn't really do. So
yeah.
It's not just to get your waifu.
Although there's plenty of that in here.
Well, you can't go too off the beaten path.
Max out Kawakami as quickly as you can.
Well, yeah, that is actually a very good idea, although it's an expensive idea if you try to do that early on. I mean, goddamn, she costs a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. She's not a prostitute. Well, kind of. Sorta, kinda.